Let's look at the anatomy of the heart. Before you know anything about the anatomy of an organ, you have to understand that the left side of the organ is actually on the right side of the picture, and the right side of the organ is actually on the left side of the picture. You may wonder why this is. It's because all organ diagrams are demonstrated in such a way as if you were facing a patient head-on. So if you're the doctor looking at this patient, you need to know that the left side of their heart is over here and the right side is over here. Otherwise, you can make some very costly mistakes. If you ever see a diagram of a heart and you're not sure which is left and which is right, just look at this pointy part down here. That's called the apex. And the apex of the heart is always pointed slightly to the left. That's why when you say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, you put your hand slightly on the left side of your chest. Actually, the heart is located more in the center, but this pointy apex is slightly towards the left. So what are the components of the heart? Well, the heart has 4 chambers. We have up here the left atrium, and then on the other side, the right atrium. These are the smaller chambers of the heart, and what they do is they're the first part of the heart that the blood flows into. So blood flows in there usually because of the vacuum created by the other chambers pushing the blood out, and then as the lower chambers open, they suck blood into the atria. So the bottom chambers are called ventricles. So we'll have our left ventricle and our right ventricle. And the ventricles are much stronger parts of the heart. So you can see here how thick the muscle tissue is down here in the ventricle, while it's very, very thin up here in the atrium. And this has to do with the ventricles being the part of the heart that really push the blood through, and the atria are more passive. We also have some very important structures called valves. And valves are going to be used as one-way doors. So you have 4 valves in the heart. You have a valve right here and a valve right here. So those are the valves that separate the atria and the ventricles. And then we also have valves here and here. And those valves separate the ventricles from the large blood vessels that carry the blood out of the heart. So the reason we have these valves is because you need to make sure the blood only flows in one direction. What the heart is it's actually a double pump system, and it needs to make sure that the blood is circulating in a specific way. So you don't want blood rushing backwards, only down from one chamber to the next, and then out, and in this chamber down, and then also out, actually going all the way up this way. In fact, if you have valves that are misfunctioning, then what happens is you get something called a heart murmur. So that's when the valves are kind of flapping open and closed inappropriately, and they make a noise that the doctor can hear. So now let's start over by looking only at the blood vessels. The blood vessels that bring the blood to the right side of the heart are called the vena cava. And they are a type of vein. So veins are always blood vessels that carry the blood towards the heart, and then arteries are blood vessels that take blood away from the heart. So over here we have an artery, and this particular artery is called a pulmonary artery. Anything with the word pulmonary in it means that it has to do with the lungs. So the pulmonary artery will take the blood to the lungs. Then you actually have these blood vessels over here. They are bringing blood back from the lungs to the heart. So since they're going to the heart, they are a type of vein. And because they have to do with the lungs, they're pulmonary. And you actually have them on the other side too, because of course you have both left and right lungs. And the same thing was true for the pulmonary artery, which actually branches both to the right side and the left side. So all of these blood vessels do continue to branch more and more once you're outside of the heart, but here in this diagram you only have a few of the blood vessels represented. The last one that you want to know over here is this really large blood vessel right here. And this blood vessel is actually coming from this bottom left ventricle all the way up, arches around the body, and then actually comes down this way. And this gigantic blood vessel is called the aorta. And since it is taking blood out of the heart, it is of course a type of artery. And this is the largest artery in your body. And then it will split into different directions. It takes blood over to your arms, up to your head, and then down here it would take blood to your legs and all the way down your torso to places like your liver and your kidneys. The last important structure that I'll mention is this really thick muscular layer in the middle called the septum. And the function of the septum is simply to divide the left and right sides of the heart. Pretty much, you may have noticed in this diagram that the right side is blue. That's because we're representing the right side in blue since it has carbon dioxide blood and not oxygenated blood, while the left side is designated as red because the left side has the oxygen-rich blood. Now let's look at circulation. Circulation is how the blood is pumped throughout the whole body using the heart. So we're going to create a little diagram here, and we're actually going to make the heart look like more of an abstract heart. We're going to divide it into the 4 chambers. So as you know, we have left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle. So the heart works pretty much as a double pump system. First, you have a loop going from the left ventricle throughout the whole body and up to the right atrium. This is called the systemic loop. And that's because it goes throughout your whole body. So this is going to the whole body. Then you have a second loop, which goes from the right ventricle all the way to the lungs and back to the left atrium. This is called the pulmonary circuit. And that's because it has to do with the lungs. So let's look at whether the blood is oxygenated or not oxygenated. When it comes back from the lungs, it will in fact be oxygenated. So from pulmonary into the left atrium, it's going to have oxygen. And this blood vessel, as we know, is called the pulmonary vein. Then it will go down to the ventricle and out from the ventricle to the body through the aorta. Once it's in the body, all the different branches of the blood vessels get smaller and smaller until you get really small blood vessels called capillaries. And at capillaries, the oxygen will be exchanged for carbon dioxide. So at this point, we're going to switch to carbon dioxide blood, which has to be pumped back to the heart. And that's going to go through the vena cava, along with a bunch of other veins. And this is carbon dioxide blood. That's going to go down to the ventricle, and then out to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. And then the same thing happens in the lungs, where the carbon dioxide is now going to be exchanged to oxygen using capillaries. And these capillaries will actually take place in very special small organs of the lungs called the alveoli. The capillaries down here are throughout the whole body, so it just depends on which part of the body you're looking at. The left side of the heart definitely has the more strenuous job, since it has to take blood through the whole body, the oxygenated blood. Meanwhile, the right side of the heart really only has to pump blood to the lungs, which is a very small amount of direction that it has to move.